I'm lost, wading through life. I try my best to keep it together. I have pastimes that I love, friends I laugh with on a daily basis. I'm currently studying psychology at college, and I've just been accepted to study at university. Beneath it all, I'm struggling. I can't hold on to happiness no matter how grateful I am for all that I have. I've always been anxious, shy, coy, whatever you want to call it, but until my late teen years, I had never truly suffered from mental health issues. I don't know if it was from drug use or it just developed from life experience, but I constantly struggle living with it every day. Some days I'm lost in the moment and I can escape my intrusive thoughts, any horror that my mind tries to scare me with. Other times I am flinching to try and push away thoughts that frighten me or make me uncomfortable. I'm aware this makes me sound pathetic. They are just thoughts, of course, but my own mind knows how to scare me best. I feel I have a good grasp of how to deal with it, but in the past it has been difficult. I talk to people about dreams. Some of them never think twice about them. I'm sometimes completely set off track by them in my day-to-day life. Every night I'm in a completely different realm of consciousness, showing me my true fears, my desires, my lust, my past. I see people I wish I could talk to, wishing I could talk to them in the way I do in my dreams. Getting closure with all my closest friends that I had in high school. Being able to catch up with Alex in a way that doesn't resurface any of the traumatizing things that happened during that period of my life. The times you just keep going back to sleep. REM sleep is just in full throttle. I'm lost in my mind's visions. I'm in places I haven't been in real life for a long time. Sometimes I'm in beautiful landscapes with incredible structures, statues made of marble, blue skies and vast oceans. Others with grand castles and villages, with steampunk technology towering above me, airships and nebulas fill the skies. The colours are so saturated and bright, I wish I could escape into these places rather than live in my mundane student reality. The fantasy dreamscapes are only a blessing in between the nightmares that at times really disturb me. A notable one was when I was thrown into a room with walls covered in bloody chain-linked fences, reminiscent of Silent Hill 2. The whole room had an orange hue as the light reflected onto the blood-stained walls. Within the room there was a mass of naked men. All of the men were huddled together sitting on the ground. One man was simultaneously trying to pull one of my teeth out whilst also trying to suck me off. It sounds pretty outrageous to the point where I can see it as funny, but in the moment it is pretty scary. But also strangely fascinating that my mind can conjure up these wild scenarios. The dreams that haunt me the most, though, are the ones that I have with people from my past that I never managed to get closure with. The situations we find ourselves in, and the words we share. It leaves me longing when I wake up. It makes me sad that they will never be aware of the ways that my mind puts us together. They will probably never know that my mind still holds them dear enough to spend time with each other in my consciousness. I am aware that the people I see in my dreams are just visions of my own consciousness. But in the moment, I perceive them as how I think of them. It's magical and I miss them. I guess that's why they're there. I know I am the master of self-pity. I don't like it, but I try to look at things from a fair perspective. I have had some good luck, and some very shite luck. I am brought into the world with a loving family. Two honest, beautiful people who truly love each other and me. My mum has always been a hard worker, always pursuing goals and projects. She has been working at the same job since I was born and is still there now. Working up the corporate ladder, but only when it felt right to her. She is very empathetic, calm, loving and supportive. My dad is shy, funny, friendly and full of his own interests. He would collect mint-in-the-box collectibles, movie posters, etc. He loved movies and got me into playing video games from a very young age. I remember him walking me to school, holding my hand and just being there for me. I don't have a lot of concrete memories of those days, but I know that he loved me and was there for me. But sadly when I was 6 he passed away. He died of cancer, of course. He didn't smoke. He lived a relatively peaceful life. I can see now that he was like me. Shy but charming. He seemed a lot more social than me, and writing this I can see images of him in my mind. Whilst he was alive, he was really kind to me. We would spend time together, we would play games on his PlayStation. He seemed to be really into games, and that has stuck with me throughout my life. I love video games, and I think I always will. I knew he was sick, but I didn't understand what cancer was, or what any terminal illness was at that age. I saw he was unable to do very much, constantly lying on the couch. Nurses would come in and out the house to help. I continued to go to school and I continued to live an oblivious 6-year-old life. On the day of his death, I had no idea that he died until I was informed hours afterwards. It was a Thursday, as that was the day I would go to trampolining class with my childhood best friend, and that's where I was before I found out. I came home to find a bunch of people in my living room. I remember scanning the room, but I couldn't see my dad, just a bunch of strangers mixed with family members I barely knew. I'm not sure if my mum was in the room, but all I remember was me and her going to the spare room and her telling me he was dead. We both cried together until I felt I had nothing in me. I don't remember going to sleep, just crying in despair and confusion. After the initial reaction, I spent a couple weeks off school. I can't remember anything about what happened then, but I remember what it was like going back. One of the kids in my class asked why I was off, and I told him my dad died, and he just laughed in my face. I was young, but I knew that wasn't normal. I shouldn't expect a 6-year-old to understand how to be an empathetic person, but it felt horrible hearing his grating cackle. My teacher at the time, on the other hand, was very kind. He gave me a diary and encouraged me to write in it. I would write in it, but I honestly can't remember what I wrote. I think I drew a volcano exploding. I probably felt very overwhelmed with what was going on. Before my dad died, he found out that he had a lot of half-brothers and sisters. His dad, my granddad, left him at a young age, walked out on my gran when my dad was born. My granddad went on to marry another woman and have 4 children with them. My dad found out about them before he got cancer and met up with them, but they never got very close. Me and my mum ended up going to his half-sister's house, my aunt, a lot. I think my mum wanted to feel any sort of connection to my dad now that he was gone, and they were all very welcoming people. One of the siblings was my dad's half-brother, my uncle. He was always there at my aunt's house. They would sit and watch TV, eat, drink and drink. I've had many moments of loneliness in my life, but this one was poignant. A bunch of adults being completely wasted, me being alone in a stranger's house, not knowing what to do. My mum got on with my dad's half-brother. He was very charming and he made her laugh. They started to date after a while and I hated it. What was happening? Who is this man and where is my dad? This was technically my uncle. Not blood related to my mum, but still, very blurred lines. He believed he could take care of us. My mum didn't know that all she needed was time to find the strength she has now to take care of herself and I. The man she falls in love with is an abusive, horrible bastard. He charmed his way in and showed us his true colours after he wasn't. He was an alcoholic who had the fragile mind of a child, throwing abusive tantrums at any moment he felt his fickle integrity was threatened. Half the time he took out on me. It was rarely physical, mostly through hurling mental abuse at me, calling me worthless, useless, loser, etc. He would constantly humiliate me, embarrassing me in front of my friends, shaming my personality, saying I should be like this or that. Abusing his power as a father figure, like many children I had no say, and I just had to sit and watch. His introduction into my life left me with many experiences I wish never happened. Staying over at my auntie's one night, he was there, and I was sharing a bed with my mum that night. I was around 7 years old. My mum was drunk, and he had sex with her whilst I was still in the bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and fell out of the bed, sleeping on the floor having no idea what happened. All I know is that I felt alone, and I had no one to confide in. Everyone has either heard their parents having sex, or accidentally walked in on them. It's gross, and no one wants to see it. I couldn't stand it. It made me unable to even look at my mum. To allow this man into our family and treat her like this. To me, I never saw him as loving. He was a pathetic loser who got the time of his life by taking advantage of a grieving widow. My mum took him all over the world. America, India, Africa. He repays her with abuse and gluttony. If my stepdad was ever stressed out because of her, he would casually say to my mum, "No wonder your husband died," referring to my dad, and I had to hear that regularly, and it was fucking horrible. He raped her one night on a holiday she had booked for his 40th birthday, got her blackout drunk and raped her. I found that out much later. At the time, my perspective was my mum getting way too drunk and acting like a complete idiot. The morning after that happened, me being clueless to what had happened to her, I was angry at her for getting so drunk and being such a mess. It was because I hated seeing her in those states. I saw/see her as my rock, She is so stable and sensible that when something like that happens, I can't help but be concerned or disappointed. I wish I'd just kept my mouth shut. I had no idea what she was going through. The day she kicked him out of our family was a relief that I hadn't felt my whole life up until that point. I was 12 and I think it was on a Friday. I remember my mum called me and told me whilst I was waiting for the bus to go home from school that he was being kicked out, and I finally felt safe in my own home. For the most part, I've always had a good group of friends around me. People always come and go, but at any point, there's always people I can hang out with and talk to. Sometimes the numbers are fewer, other times I've had many. The problem for me is I've only truly connected with few. I've always been an idealistic romantic. I'm one of those people who is constantly lost in thought about the idea of love. I see it as happiness, being with someone I truly connect with and they reciprocate my feelings. I think it comes from the fact that I can feel so lonely. I can talk to people with ease, but it's always about the same shit. It's when someone's humour really clicks with me, or we share similar music taste or life experience, outlook, philosophies that I am taking out of the void of loneliness that I've always been lost in. My first love is, and probably always will be, a defining point in my life. Her name is Alex. Whether she agrees with me or not, I know the feelings we felt were extremely intense for being so young, around 14 to 16. Maybe the fact we were young made it more intense. We were both experiencing love for the first time. I was first introduced to her existence through a friend who knew she was moving to her high school. I thought she was stunning. Her eyes were genuinely sparkling. I didn't think about Alex again until she was one of the only people in my year to be in my photography class. One of my friends was talking to her and invited her to our table. I could see she was very shy, shut off. I had heard from one of my other friends that she was into this game that PewDiePie was playing called Corpse Party. I had seen a couple videos of him playing it, so I tried to talk about it. She was very short with her answers, and I was insecure, so I just thought she was thinking that I was ugly or something. That day my friends Sarah and Alex were partnered to work together and take photos of the school. After getting back, Sarah was just going on and on about how I would get on with Alex, and I wanted to get on with her because she seemed cool. Photography class continued multiple times a week. Every time she would open up more and more. Eventually, for some reason, Sarah was moved to another class, so it was just me, Alex, and another guy from our year. We continued to bond every single class. I really liked her. We got on so well and I was just enamored with her. She was so unique, so witty, pretty weird as well, but I liked how genuine she was. I found out that she walked home from school, so I decided I would walk home that day and hope I would bump into her, and we would walk home together. I usually got the bus home as I lived a couple of miles away from the school, and it was a pretty far walk. For whatever reason, she would always take ages to leave school, but I decided to go to the shop in the village that she lived in. As I came out, I saw her and she shouted my name. We walked back to her house and I was so happy. I felt like I had made a friend with someone I really liked. I had never been this wanting to be in someone else's life. As time went on, we would walk home together. Every photography class, we would get to know each other more. Photography was such a relaxed class, so we would constantly joke around and have fun. I miss those times. They seem so innocent now. One night I was on call with my guy friends on Skype. I know, right? Sarah was having a party at her house, and I wasn't a very social type, so the idea of going to a party was pretty nerve-wracking for me. I found out Alex was going, and I was so excited, I decided I'd ask Sarah if me and one of my friends could go. She said that was cool, so we went. As soon as I went in, Alex hugged me and gave me a drink. I had never been drunk before, so I was nervous, but I just went with it. I drank the whole thing. It was her drink and I remember she was so mad, but in a joking way. I got increasingly more drunk. Your first time being drunk is definitely the best. My social nerves were gone, and I was a total embarrassment, but I was having so much fun. I was singing, talking to new people, dancing, laughing. It was great. Alex came up to me and asked me if I wanted a kiss. I tried to play it off like I couldn't understand her. It just didn't feel right to kiss her then. It was going to be passed off as just a casual party thing, and I was going to see her in photography class again, and I didn't want to potentially ruin our friendship, so I avoided it. I'm not sure how this made her feel, but she ended up going off with another guy, and of course I was upset, but part of me just knew it wouldn't be anything serious, so I continued on partying. After my first time drinking, I discovered a version of myself that I didn't know existed. A person who wasn't constantly waiting to be spoken to first to be able to speak. Someone who wasn't concerned about being an embarrassment, or if I wasn't funny, or being perceived as weird just for wanting to hug a friend. As a kid, I was always really affectionate with my friends. I would want to hug them and show them I cared. It was only as I began to be socialised that it was shown to me that as a boy, that was pretty weird. It was seen as strange or weak. But I didn't have any anger in me as a young child. All I wanted was to be kind and for others to be kind. It's like after drinking, having my inhibitions lowered, I could access that part of me that was buried away so deeply out of shame. Now on a side note, I never had any problems with being a man/boy. Even if I wasn't typically rowdy, had an innate interest in sports and was emotional, I've always felt it was a good thing to be a man who wore their emotions on their sleeve. I find it crazy that a man should be expected to withhold who they are just out of shame as being seen as weak. So many men will suppress who they are just because it's been drilled into their psyche to be this way, even if they aren't even conscious of it. That's not to say there aren't men there who are genuinely less emotional, just like there are women who aren't as empathetic or emotional as their gender roles suggest they should be. I think it should be encouraged for people to be who they are, regardless of their gender or sex. If you're a man and you want to be seen as flamboyant and wear dresses, that doesn't make you any less of a man. You're still as much of a man as a bodybuilder or a soldier. Being physically tough or brave isn't what makes a man. In my opinion, society's definition of characteristics and behaviours aren't what make a man/woman. It's the biology. It is so human to want to divide everything and put it into categories. But an assertive female CEO isn't a more manly woman, she is a woman. And her behaviour/personality isn't defined by being an outlier from typical female gender roles. A person's behaviour and presentation doesn't define their biology. Society may define genders with pronouns and gender roles, and if that's how they want to be, then that's their own philosophy. Personally, I accept people as they come, but I also have my own beliefs and I hate gender roles. They are limiting, not progressive, and are just convenient. They are a placeholder to make it easier for people to digest individuals or minorities who are outliers of society's expectations. I'm sure someone would consider what I said to be offensive towards trans people, but I think trans people are beautiful. If their way of expressing themselves and feeling at peace with themselves is to identify as another gender, then that's the easiest way for society's view to understand why they are the way they are. Because their assigned gender roles do not align with how they feel. I have no hatred or any negative emotion towards any members of the LGBTQ community because of their gender or their sexuality. Rant over. Alex was having a party at her house a month or so after Sarah's. I was even more nervous to go to this one because I wasn't just going to a party that she was attending, I was going to her party. Alex was so amazing with me at this point though. She made me feel so wanted, saying it wasn't going to be a party without me being there. When I arrived at hers, she was standing with me in the kitchen, and I was saying how I felt shy to talk to her friends, but she introduced me to them, and I started drinking. I had it in my mind that the quicker I drank, the faster I would feel the effects, and the faster I could get to enjoying myself. I was drinking shots of spirits in quick succession, but I felt nothing. More people were arriving and I would egg them on to do some shots with me because I had no small talk to offer at that point. The drink eventually hit, and I wasn't even tipsy. I was a sloppy mess from the start. This night is where I had my first kiss. It was with a girl I had never even spoken to. I was hugging lots of people and being friendly, so I opened my arms up to this girl to hug her. She came up to me and all of a sudden I felt a tongue in my mouth. I had always been nervous about kissing someone, how to do it, if I would be any good, and if I would ever actually kiss someone. In a way, this first kiss completely rid any opportunity for me to have those thoughts, because there was no lead up to it. It just happened, and to be honest, I was ecstatic. Combined with the drink and the high of kissing a girl, I was on the fucking mood. I ended up kissing 3 girls that night, a complete stud in the making to be honest. None of these girls were Alex. I said to her I felt it would ruin our friendship, so we just hugged it out a bunch. The girls I kissed meant nothing to me personally. I didn't know them outside of this night, but with Alex, I had butterflies in my stomach every time I saw her. Just like the previous party, I didn't want to potentially ruin any imaginary future with her. I wanted it to be perfect. Kissing her in a drunken mess just wasn't right to me. I remember previous to the party, as I was walking home with Alex, I spoke about how pain is numbed when drinking, and I felt if she was to punch me full force when drunk, I wouldn't even be bothered. I have no idea why I would want her to do that, but I guess I was just curious to see if it would. She ended up doing it that night and my drink went flying out of my hand, but I don't remember it being painful. She suggested giving me a friendship scar, which is something I hadn't heard of until that point. But she said she could give me a scar on my arm that would stay there forever and would remind me of her. I was down for her to do it, and she was right. That scar is still on my arm. It isn't massive or extremely noticeable, but it is there, and I do think about her every time that I see it. But to be honest, I don't need a scar to remember her. Both the scar and me losing my kissing virginity ended up not being the most notable point of that night. All of the drinking continued, and I had already way too much in my system. I'm not sure when, but I blacked out. I was still partying for hours during my blackout, but I have no recollection of a lot of that night. I regained consciousness when waking up in the hospital, my mum staring back at me. I was more than confused. It was like I had teleported. I quickly gathered what had happened, and as I began to realise where I always realised I felt like death. I stunk of alcohol, and the colour of my skin reflected that feeling. A nurse came to me and asked a bunch of questions, a lot of them wondering if I was suicidal or struggling mentally. Looking back, I feel they were probably judging my mum, but this wasn't a result of her parenting. It was a result of me being an anxious idiot, desperate for alcohol to unlock the gates to a version of myself that wasn't scared to be myself. Behaviour which probably derived from somewhere in my childhood. I opened my phone to a lot of messages, people being happy to hear I was okay, and a lot of versions of what had happened to me. I had banged my head a lot during the night and apparently was pushed down the stairs. Honestly, you can't really expect a bunch of young teenagers to be responsible when drinking, and this definitely wasn't an exception. My mum had told me that she had gotten a call from my friend Ian's mum, informing her that I was unresponsive. My mum had been having a drink herself that night and couldn't drive, so Ian's mum was the one who took her to collect me. The only reason there was no ambulance called was because of Alex. She was distraught at the idea of her dad getting into trouble for allowing this party to happen, or for her to get into trouble with the police for drinking, etc. In hindsight, this does reflect a lot on Alex as a person, someone who, even in the face of a friend potentially dying, is still concerned with herself. My mum was aware of that, but my blind infatuation with her couldn't allow that to stop me from wanting to be with her. I ended up being okay. A lot of people at school were coming up to me and talking to me about it. They found it quite funny. Honestly, it just made me feel stupid. People who never spoke to me now were coming up to me thinking I was some form of drama or entertainment. In a way, I did kind of like it though. I liked being seen as someone who lived an exciting life, even though in my eyes it was a stupid mistake. Christmas of that year, 2014, me and Alex were talking, and she had gotten a new phone. She asked for my number and she would message me every day, all the time, and I loved it. I was so surprised by how much she liked talking to me. On New Year's, she invited me over to her house. We drank, danced, and watched my favourite movie at the time, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. We both slept on separate couches in our living room. I remember being scared of the morning when her dad would come down and see me there. I even had dreams that night about him coming down and being furious. When he actually came down, he asked if we wanted McDonald's. I was so surprised by how he was being so kind. I remember she hugged me when I left and I patted her on the back. I don't know why I'd done that, but I remember cringing after I'd done it because I knew it wasn't normal. In April of 2015, I got the opportunity to go on holiday to Austria. It was organised by my school and my mum generously paid for me to go. I had never been in another country away from my mum. It was very exciting, but also a bit nerve-wracking. I was sitting next to Sarah on the bus taking us there. It was going to be a 36-hour drive. At this point, Sarah and I were so close, and would only become closer friends after this trip. It may sound a bit stupid, but one of my favourite parts of the trip was the bus journey. I was with a bunch of school friends I would never go on holiday with in any other context, but them being there made it special. All the different personalities mixed together on a big trip to another country. I loved staring at the window, seeing all the changing scenery, through morning, afternoon, evening to night, watching the colours of the sky change. It was beautiful. I had made a playlist for the trip, filled with a lot of new music I hadn't listened to before. One of the key parts of the playlist was a mix by an EDM label named Monster Cat. They had made a mix from the songs off of their Perspective album. It was called the Aspect Mix. I loved every single song on that mix, and it would bury its way deep into my heart. Every time I listen to it, I am filled with so much nostalgia, it aches. As we got closer to Austria, I would begin to see these glistening silver trees covered in frost. It was so mesmerizing. I had never seen anything like that with my own eyes, and it felt truly magical. I also listened to a lot of the album Vessel by 21 Pilots, which had a lot of similarities with the Monster Cat album in terms of sound. The whole album is this electronic masterpiece filled with some of the most relatable lyrics a young adolescent can hear. It also has a special place in my heart. 21 Pilots would go on to be the defining artists of some of the best years of my life. Their music was the soundtrack to me and my friends' adolescence. The trip itself had so many hilarious moments. One of the standout moments for me was when everyone had the choice to either go shopping or go to a swimming pool. Me and my friends decided to go to the swimming pool. It was amazing. It was late at night, so not a lot of people were there. Everyone was running to go on this amazing flume that had areas where you would spiral into a dark tunnel and come flying at the end. We would all go on it again and again, laughing so much. That on its own was amazing, but it got better. Me and my closest friends that were on the trip all went out to a heated outdoor pool. It was surrounded by snow and it was lit up by RGB lighting. It was so beautiful. I could see the stars and it was so relaxing. It was a beautiful moment I share with people that I haven't seen or spoken to in years, but it is a standout memory to me. Over the trip I did actually learn to snowboard a little, and we had a lot of fun doing that, but the best parts to me were in between the snowboarding. All the beautiful and stupid moments were what made it for me. I was turning 15 on the night that we came back from Austria. We arrived home early on my birthday. It was the Easter holidays, so I was off for the next week after that. On the day of my birthday, Alex was begging to come over. She was so adamant about being with me on my birthday. I had never had a friend who wanted to celebrate with me so badly. I was like, okay, come up. I wasn't doing anything, so I was very happy to have her come over. I was still nervous though. When she arrived, she gave me so many presents, sweets, money, and one of the best presents that I've ever received. We both watched anime together all the time, so she decided to paint me and her in the style of an anime called Tokyo Ghoul, which was one of my favourites at the time. I loved it so much. A painting of us together, in a style of an interest we both shared. It was perfect, and I loved it so much. I hung it up on my wall straight away. We ate cake and laughed, sucked helium out of balloons that my mum got for me, and were just messing about. We continued to talk every day. She ended up dating this guy who I didn't really like. He was a bit of a football lad. But when he was over, all she would do was talk to me. I found it really confusing and it messed with me a bit. I remember thinking, why are you with him but talking to me? It started to make me feel a bit jaded. I felt like I was just being used as a listening ear, but looking back that wasn't the case. I was just being insecure. I ended up going to the school counsellor about it because I just needed someone to talk to, and it actually helped a lot. They broke up, and I honestly couldn't have been happier. I went out with Sarah and Alex on the 24th of April 2015. It was a Friday. We walked all the way across the fields at the back of this nature reserve to this abandoned house we called the Haunted House. Very original. We were drinking a bit, but mainly just laughing with each other. I was in love, just watching Alex having a good time with me, watching her running through the fields, laughing and falling over. It was the time of my life. I walked her home. On the way back we sat down at this bus stop. She started asking how I was really doing and asking about me in general. Everything inside me wanted to tell her how much I felt for her. Everything built up inside me and I just let it out. I felt so confident. She told me she had told her friend that she thought she was in love with me. That was the best thing I could have ever heard. I kissed her, and it was a bad one. We held hands. It was just perfect. Even the bad kiss. I walked home with her and we said goodbye to each other. I called my mum and I told her everything. That walk home was one of the happiest moments of my life. Dopamine, serotonin, whatever. It happened because of how we connected with each other, and it was beautiful to me. We spent the next few days not really talking about what happened, but we ended up going to a trampoline park together, and we had a great time. 3 days after I confessed my feelings to her, I got the courage to ask if I could come to her house. I asked her if she wanted to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. The feeling to even be in her house, to be with her in her room, I was just completely filled with love. It didn't make me feel less shy around her at times. I was still nervous. She would invite me over. The acceptance and approval I felt from her just made me so happy. I had never wanted someone to like me so badly, and she loved me. We would go out together, walk around forests together. We broke into a factory in our town. I remember she cried next to me after we'd been together for a couple of months. She said she was so happy with me. I tried to keep it together, but in that moment I felt like I was truly worth something. She was obsessed with anime. I liked it too. She introduced it to me. We would watch it together at the same time on our phones before we were together. We would watch episodes of so many different animes in her living room, falling asleep together whilst watching it. Everything felt completely natural. We had our own friends, but we were just completely focused on each other. It was the most honeymoon of honeymoon phases. We would go out together to different cities, and I wouldn't even think of it as dates. I just loved being with her. She had her own family issues though. Her parents were divorced. Her dad was also an alcoholic. But he wasn't verbally or physically abusive. He was just quite neglectful. I really liked him though. He was a funny guy and very friendly as well. When we were together at her house, the majority of the time it was just the two of us. It felt like we were in our own world. There was a time when I was taken with her to meet more of our family. I was very shy in that moment. I was just observing the people around me. Her auntie had a lot of self-harm scars, and I think I remember her uncle being a drug addict. They were very real people who had suffered but were still going strong. I remember a specific moment where Alex's older sister turned to me and said welcome to the family. She was so sweet. I have a feeling of regret in the way I was so shy back then. I always wanted to get on with people, and she tried her best with me. I had moments where I spoke with her one-on-one and I enjoyed that, but I always felt very timid around her. Probably because she was older and very hot. She didn't seem as creative or introspective as Alex, but still cool. Really, she had done everything she could to make me feel welcome, and I appreciated that. I don't know how to describe it, but there's a feeling you get when you're welcomed into someone else's life. Like you have become this temporary part of it. Every moment feels fleeting. I hoped it would never end, but I always knew it would one day. I treasured every moment. One day I was thinking about it ending. Nothing bad had happened, I was just thinking about it. I decided to take photos of her room, just to treasure the memory of her space. It sounds a bit creepy, but I was just afraid really, I didn't want to lose her. Alex was the first person I had ever gotten intimate with. She was quite forward about it with me. She wanted to have sex with me, and I did too, but I was just so inexperienced. We kissed all the time, but I never imagined we'd be doing anything more together at the time. But I guess it just felt right. I was still very nervous. One day we were lying down together. She had asked me to touch her a couple times before this, and I enjoyed doing that. I liked that I was making her happy intimately, but I had never gotten naked in front of her. It was mainly out of insecurity about my penis. Watching porn as a young teen makes you believe that everyone has insanely big dicks. I wasn't blessed with a porn star penis, so in my head I thought mine was very small. That it wouldn't be good enough for her. She said she didn't care about how big it was, so I just said fuck it and went for it. We ended up having sex, and for me at least, it was amazing. My teeth were buzzing. I had never felt that before. I was just so overwhelmed with euphoria. She later told me I had the biggest she had seen. Probably not, in fact definitely not anymore. Considering the only penis that she had seen besides mine was from the most popular guy in our school, who she dated before me, I felt pretty good about it, especially when he was such a piece of shit. We were having so much fun together. It continued like that for a while. I would walk home with her from school, holding hands and enjoying each other's company. I would stay over at her house from the end of school till late at night, and if it was the weekend, I would stay over. I enjoyed being at her dad's house the most, since he was out all the time. I just felt so comfortable and happy having company with someone I wanted to be with more than anything in the world, and what felt like reciprocated feelings. We would meet up and go for adventures around town, going into abandoned buildings and just satisfying our want for adventure. She was also always so complimentary of me, saying how made her feel like she was in an anime. Knowing her, this was a very high standard of compliment, as that was her dream. I really liked how talented she was. She was great at drawing and her wall was covered in art. I really respected her work as I am terrible at drawing. When we were out with friends, we were always together. We would go camping, sleep together and have sex in the tent. When everyone else was talking around the campfire, we were under a blanket together talking to each other. We were probably very annoying, but I was happy. Of course, it couldn't stay perfect forever. Time went on and we did fall out sometimes. I would be offended at certain things, mainly out of jealousy. She spoke about wanting to have threesomes in the future, and I didn't want that. I just wanted her. I didn't like the idea of her wanting to have sex with another guy. Made me feel like I wasn't enough. She used to throw parties at her house and a lot of older guys would come over. She would talk to them and I just felt alone. The feeling I had when it was just us would disappear. I remember consciously making the decision to leave just to see if she would notice, which is a toxic thing to do, but I just wanted her to pay attention to me. She didn't notice, and when I came back I decided I wanted to go home. She was crying and upset that I was upset at her. I didn't want to fall out, but I just didn't want to be there. I went home and woke up to a bunch of Snapchat stories posted from her. She was in her room with one of my friends, a bunch of laughing and photos. I was just completely torn up. Why is this how she responds to me leaving? It was all very melodramatic, all very teenage drama type of crap, but at the time I was just angry. I think I should have seen that she wasn't all in like she was in the beginning. I should have left then, but I didn't want to. Within the relationship, my lack of emotional control resulted in a night where I behaved in a way I will always regret. It fills me with shame to know I scared someone I cared very deeply about. I can't remember exactly what it was that we had fallen out about, but I was upset. I remember trying to speak to her, but she wasn't saying anything. I felt like I couldn't resolve the issue. I felt so much pent-up frustration that I just started banging my head against the door. I felt like it was a cry for help. I wanted her to see how much I was struggling at that moment, mixed with a lot of raging teenage hormones. I burst into tears, and I can only imagine how much it frightened her seeing me do that. Something I struggle with to this day is managing my frustration. I have found ways that help, but I can still struggle with getting it out in a healthy way. It is extremely difficult because I am painfully aware of how embarrassing it is to have anger outbursts, headbutting/punching walls, etc. No one wants to do that. It is shamed intensely online, and even when I was doing it, I was thinking about how I was being perceived and how much I didn't want to be like that. Sometimes emotions can just be so overwhelming. On a positive note, no doors have been headbutted since then. I do have a problem with anger though. I'm usually very chill and quite leveled emotionally, but there are times where I just explode. It is very infrequent and at times unpredictable, but it can spiral pretty quickly. I start shouting really loud and I'm filled with so much uncomfortable energy that I don't know what to do with, so I shout louder, hit myself, anything to make the feeling go away. If I don't catch myself spiraling, it is a lot harder to calm down from it, but once I do calm down, I'm filled with shame and embarrassment. It isn't who I want to be. I would like to work on it. Alex also scared me quite a bit though. She would self-harm, but at times it was specifically when she felt she had disappointed me, not because I had explicitly said she had, but if she felt she had. There was a time where we were outside with friends, and I had jokingly pretended to play dead on the grass. Very stupid of me. It was probably another cry for attention. She came over to me and shook me, then slapped me really hard. I think she thought I had passed out or something. I responded by saying, "Ah, what the fuck," or something along those lines. It genuinely hurt, so I walked off just to take a second to calm down, but by the time I came back to her, there were scars all over her shoulder. She would violently tear at her arm to leave scars. This made me really upset. I hated seeing her do stuff like that. It happened a couple of other times and it made me feel like I could never express any issues I felt we had, that we couldn't talk over anything in the relationship. I felt if she had ever made me upset, I could never let on because I know she would hurt herself. Things were fine after we would make up, but she showed me she still wasn't all in when she broke up with me. She started to hang out with older guys with her girlfriends, always staying out late and going to parties. I was confident in our love, so I didn't feel jealous because she didn't seem to be flirting with any of them. One of the guys there, called Grant, was an ex of Sarah's, and I thought he was a total cunt, having sex with my friend when she was underage, emotionally abusing her, generally just a sad prick. One night we had fallen out, and I said, "Only message me when you want to talk to me." I don't remember what it was in response to, but she didn't message me the next day. I called her when I was in the bath and asked her what was going on. She said she wanted to break up, and I reacted very dramatically, crying all over the place, shouting, "Mum, she wants to break up with me." I was a mess. Honestly, writing about this at this point in my life puts into perspective how dramatic relationships can be, especially when you're a teenager. It all feels very in your face at the time, but in retrospect, it just seems kind of pathetic. Alex ended up coming over to be with me in person. I was upset and wanted to get rid of anything to do with her. I gave back the painting of us and her clothes. She ended up staying over and it was very depressing. I was with her, but I wasn't with her anymore. I was sleeping next to her, but I knew my touch didn't have the same effect it would have months before. It felt like I was less than alone. I knew when she left it was going to turn my life upside down. When she was leaving, I kissed her for the last time. I asked if this was okay to do as I wanted to remember our last kiss. I guess I wanted to have some sort of control in what I knew was going to be something that was completely out of my control. The kiss felt desperate. I knew there was no passion there anymore and that it was more like a favour rather than something out of love. It just felt empty. Two soft pieces of tissue just pressing against each other. After she left we would text, but it just felt hopeless and empty on my part. She continued to hang around with her new friends, and I decided to hang out with mine. I'd go out with my guy friends and put on a smile, but inside, I feel a wrenching ache that I hadn't felt before. I was getting drunk and being stupid. I started to hang out with my guy friends a lot more, drinking and drinking. There was a guy that joined the group that I didn't know very well. I liked him being there though it was different. I mainly hung about with these guys, Jared, John and Calder. Calder was the new guy to the group. The occasional drinking became every weekend, going out drinking, going back to someone's house, drinking some more. It developed into us wanting to get weed to smoke as we were getting bored of the drinking. I had smoked weed before with Alex and Sarah. We had wanted to try it together. I had never even smoked a cigarette before at this point, so I had no idea what I was doing, which resulted in them getting high out of their minds and me not feeling anything because I didn't inhale. Me and Alex ended up doing it together at the haunted house. It was a sunny day and I managed to inhale. I felt it and I liked it. We walked in the sun, laughing and hugging. We went to the shop and got cake. It was an amazing sunny day, eating cake and being fried. I remember hugging her and it just felt so warm. It was a really nice day. Anyway, the group whittled down to just me, Jared and Calder, as John was basically kept prisoner by his parents. We would get weed after school and meet up, get stoned and listen to music. All sounds very basic, but I loved it so much. A bit too much. The pain I felt from Alex leaving me, I unconsciously covered it up by smoking so much weed. It went from a weekly thing to a whenever we had it thing. Then I'd get it on my own and just stay inside and listen to music. I began to see our friendship wasn't about being friends. It was about getting stoned. We tried some other drugs together. I probably wouldn't have, but Calder would constantly peer pressure us into wanting to do it. I was really surprised about how much he wanted to try these stronger drugs at a young age. I was scared, really. Calder began to have a bit of an influence on me. I was internally struggling, easily influenced, and I was looking for some sort of direction. After Alex broke up with me, I could barely turn up to school. I shared a lot of classes with her, and I couldn't even look at her. We shared my favourite class, which was drama. I couldn't ignore how I felt enough to block it out and focus on my acting. I would hide behind the curtains that covered the stage in the main assembly hall, waiting for the class to end so I could just get through it. I didn't think about it with a level head, but I was completely losing myself to the pain I felt. There's a feeling of adrenaline and butterflies that come along with having romantic interest in someone. Whenever you see them, your body is jolted with this intense feeling that can really rock you. That feeling that was there originally, it motivated me to talk to her and push myself to be around her. It was now interpreted differently post-breakup. I would get the same feeling, but it was mixed in with shame and honestly fear. She had power over me. Even being in her presence, I felt like I was bothering her, like I was a bad dog that needed to cower away, which is basically what I did. The feeling that originally drew me closer to her now repelled me away. I operated in a way that orbited around her, but ultimately, it was to do with me. These emotions were too much to handle. Hiding away felt like the only answer, even though all it did was propel me into an even bleaker reality. Barely a month post-breakup, she started dating Grant. I was so confused about why she was dating such a bastard. This obviously tore me up even more. It was like I had blinked and my whole life was turned upside down, like I thought it would. Obviously, I still had things to be grateful for at the time, but at that time, Alex was my whole life. I was forced to perform my drama exam in front of Grant and Alex's dad, which was pretty overwhelming, but I managed to do it. I failed 3 of my exams and passed 2. I stayed on until the start of 6th year, but my friends were rapidly dropping out of school and I just couldn't turn up and actually give a shit. I was more concerned about my high school relationships than anything else. Studying wasn't even a thought at the most important time in my high school. My first year of exams I got 2 A's, 2 B's and 2 C's. I clearly had some sort of potential in academics, but my will and direction was completely out the window. After I dropped out, I was just completely gone. On my computer all day, smoking weed. I would beg for house chores to buy weed. I would begin to steal from my mum. It was terrible. I was completely latched onto my vice. It was the only thing that could cover up how shit everything was going. I had completely given up. I was suicidal inside. I started listening to a lot of different music and immersing myself in a lot of drug subcultures online. Part of it was cathartic, in how I was finding a way out from the pain through escapism. The music was a huge part of my healing process. From 2017 to 2018, I basically only cared about music and weed. I understand what I'm saying is bouncing around a lot, but I will try to continue and end each significant part, even if it takes a couple paragraphs to get back on track. Once I had left school, I had more time to hang out with Calder and do drugs. One day we decided to get acid. I had managed to convince myself it was something I wanted to do, even though I was pretty scared. I just didn't want to be a coward, even though I'd completely given up by this point. Calder, Jared and I were invited to a party at Alex's. I couldn't pass up on this since I felt a bit more confident with my friends around me. Going back into our house was pretty overwhelming. I was entering what I once considered a safe haven, now it was just depressing. Alex welcomed us in, and basically as soon as I went in, Grant was all over her. I had never seen her kiss someone else after me. There's a specific sinking feeling in you when you experience seeing the one you love kiss someone else. It is completely soul-crushing. I managed to push it to the side. I was smoking lots of weed that night. Lots of people at the party thought we were cool because we had weed and were flocking to hang out with us. Grant came up to me and I was convinced he was going to try to start something. Instead, he just turned and walked away after he came up to us. After smoking a bunch, we decided it was best to go back to mine to take the acid. That was the plan. We got back to my house and took it, but it was bitter, meaning it wasn't acid, as in LSD. LSD shouldn't have a taste, meaning what we were taking was fake acid, and potentially toxic. At the time I didn't really care, I just accepted it and waited. Jared and Calder also took it. My childhood friend David was also with us, but he was just there to chill. The effects took hold pretty quickly and my roof started wiggling. It got pretty intense. Everything started to become very slow looking and the hues of colour were fogging in my room. We turned the lights off and just started to watch videos with trippy visuals on my computer. I was looking at my phone and the white letters had blue, red and green dancing around it. It was like my brain was perceiving colour differently, seeing as how the phone was made up with LEDs, the colour that made up the white were just dancing around it. It was pretty cool. There was a point where we just couldn't stop laughing to the point where we couldn't breathe. But it wasn't normal laughing, it was like manic laughing. It was uncontrollable. It was like we were collectively so overwhelmed by what we were experiencing and all we could do was just laugh. I felt very heavy and I just wanted to lie down. I honestly wanted it to end. I saw lots of visuals when I closed my eyes. Some of it was pretty cool, some of it was very strange. I eventually got so fed up with Jared and Calder being around me, I just kicked them out of my room and tried to sleep. The other time I decided to take harder drugs was when I took ecstasy at a party. The host's father owned a farm, so we were hanging out in this massive barn filled with farming vehicles, hay bales, and a room to sit in. It was massive. I took half of a pink pill and waited to feel something. When it hit, it honestly felt amazing, and I hated that it felt so good. That's why I currently hate drugs. They fool you into this false reality that they're fun and you should want to take them. I felt so good, so relaxed, so comfortable. I was talking openly, and I felt fine. I ended up doing it a couple more times out of my own choice because I liked it. I eventually decided I couldn't keep doing it because it just completely ruins your serotonin receptors. I had a conversation with Calder one time when we were on it. He told me he thought he was depressed and opened up to me a bit. The day after, he claimed the conversation never happened and just started acting like a total twat. Emotions for some people are such difficult things to express. There is so much potential for underlying systems in their mind that prevent them from expressing them. Maybe their parents, childhood friends, or media influence them into repressing them or processing them in a way that results in toxic behavior. I have never felt like this. I am not ashamed to say how I feel. I could talk for hours with people about how I feel or how they feel. Expressing how I feel is something that I enjoy, especially when it's with someone who can reciprocate my honesty. It feels like I am actually bonding with someone, and we feel safe with each other to be vulnerable and not worry about a negative outcome. In the case of Calder, it was like expressing that he could be depressed was like an admission of guilt, an action that only came about with the use of drugs. I could see to him that it was a big deal, but to me saying something like that to a friend is natural. It should be. Hiding your emotions or being ashamed of them around your friends isn't something I consider to be normal. It was like I had to readjust myself to act around my guy friends. Emotional expression I felt was second nature was like talking to children who were picking up shapes for the first time. I would be consoling my friends about things that they should have been able to talk about with their families or themselves for years previous. So they behaved in strange ways after we had discussed them. They would counteract this vulnerability with toxicity, like they saw me as a target to be shot at for even giving them a space to express themselves, like I had to be put down as I was an extension of what they tried so hard to repress. Calder was such a strange guy. I had never met someone so insecure, yet so good looking. He liked to manipulate me and try to play with me. I am a very honest person, and there's no games with me. I am always going to say it like it is or just not say anything at all. He just messed with me quite a bit. The final straw was when we decided to do acid again. I didn't even want to do it. I was just not myself anymore. At one point Calder left my room and hid in my house. We looked around for him but couldn't find him. We texted him and he said that he had left and that his gran came and picked him up. So me, Jared and David decided to leave to go on a walk, and then Calder appeared on the top of my garden fence. I asked him to get down and he wouldn't. I was honestly just fueled with anger at how this guy was just being so disrespectful to us in the situation we were in. How he was messing with us on acid and just being a total idiot. We were walking along and the tension in the air was just so strong. David started crying. I felt like it was because of how uncomfortable the situation was. Calder had just made it so weird. This was David's first time taking acid and he just started messing with us. We went into the woods and Calder started walking past me whispering "fuck you," and I just gave up. I said I'm going home and they can do whatever they want. Jared tried to talk me out of it, but I just gave into the idea he was using me to do drugs at my house. I was totally done with them. Besides David, I don't think he ever done anything wrong. I went home to the house on my own, lay down in my bed and just went on my phone. My thoughts began to feel very disorganized, and I couldn't handle being on my own. I called up my mum and told her what happened, and she said she was on her way home from where she was. I decided to call my dog through, and lay my bed duvet down on the ground and lie down with him and just pet him. I could write a whole page just about my dog. I love him so much. He is a Staffordshire Bull Terrier that my stepdad got when he was with us. He was into the whole I'm a working class hard man type of thing, and my dog just added to his image. Even though my dog is just the complete opposite of what you might expect. He is the biggest sweetheart in the world, a beautiful, well-behaved, kind soul. He lights up my life whenever I see him, and I always want the best for him. Now that I live away from home, I am always longing to see him. Gone are the days I wake up to the pitter-patter of his paws around the house. I am sent videos and photos of him all the time, but I miss him so much. Whenever I visit home, I spend all my time with him, petting him, going out for walks and giving him treats. Anyway, to try and make up for my time spent away from him, which can never be made up for, but I still try to show him how much I love him. We lied down together for a while, then I decided to call up my friend Harry. I haven't mentioned him before, but I could also write a whole page about him too. What I consider to be my true best friend, my closest friend. I live with him now. He is a kind-hearted guy who doesn't intentionally mess people about. He's smart, usually has great conversation. We make each other laugh all the time, and he's just the best. He came up to mine as soon as I asked. We hung out together and I told him what had happened. He already thought Calder was a prick and had long given up on Jared. We hung out together and smoked some weed. He calmed me down a lot, and he was there for me, and I'm glad he was. A couple hours after he was over, I get a call from Jared. I said to Harry before I picked up, I bet he's going to ask if we have any weed. I pick up the phone and he asks me how I'm doing, and all the bullshit people say when they're trying to sweeten you up to get what they want. He then asked if I had any weed. I said no, and I hung up. After that, I decided to cut ties with those guys and just stick to my family and Harry. 2018 came around and I had no money. My mum knew I was smoking and stopped giving me money. I was in a bit of a situation because I was completely addicted at this point. I signed on to the dole, and I was overwhelmed with shame. I never wanted to be in the position where I had to sign on for government welfare, and just felt dirty. The idea of someone seeing me when I went down to the job centre just felt defeating. I knew I was better than this, and I was looking for jobs every day. My anxiety always made it difficult to want to get a job. I always overthought it. I was worried about if I would even be able to perform simple tasks and interact with customers in a positive way. When I'm comfortable with people, I am very open and friendly, but small talking with strangers just seems to completely drain my energy. It leaves me in a bad mood. I worried I wouldn't be able to uphold a positive appearance in any customer-facing job, even interacting with workmates. I completely overthought it and it made me extremely anxious about getting a job. I ended up getting a job at a factory as a production operator. I felt confident going in because I had a friend who had worked there. I thought if he can do it, well, so can I. It was a decent journey away from my house, and I would bike there every day. It was starting to become quite hot, and at this point I started listening to Mac DeMarco a lot. His music was perfect for biking in the summer. The job itself was insanely mundane. Repetitive tasks, standing up all day. My back was absolutely killing me, and the majority of the employees were middle-aged people who had worked there for years. It was a place to kill dreams. No inspiration, no thought, just brainless labor. I knew I couldn't do this for the rest of my life, even though I never intended to. I just knew I didn't want to be stuck working at this kind of job. Even though the work sucked, the pay was decent, and I was working there full time. I had enough money for weed, food, anything I wanted. A main goal I was striving for was to save up enough money to pay for my car insurance. It gave me enough motivation to get through the summer. I managed to pass my driving test first time after a lot of practice, and I had enough to buy my first car insurance payment. It was over £1,300. The feeling of being able to drive in my car legally was a beautiful feeling. I felt like it had opened a whole new section to life that was just unavailable to me previously. Summer was coming to an end, and I knew I had to apply for college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I mentioned driving my car legally because I drove it illegally a couple of times. I'd occasionally drive it to my weed dealer's house late at night when all my neighbours were asleep, and there would be no one on the roads. It was still a stupid thing to do, but I felt pretty confident in my ability to drive at that point, and my test was coming up. I managed to get there without any problems, but on my way back I was reversing out of the street and came inches from reversing into a parked car. I remember it because I had an instinct to check my rear mirror midway whilst reversing, proving I wasn't currently road ready, as I should have been doing that anyway. I'd just checked in time, and I was about to crash into that car behind me. Besides that, I managed to get my weed and drive home with no problems. I felt such a big rush of adrenaline when arriving home. Felt like I had gotten away with murder. Weed, not getting caught, and the fact I didn't have to cycle an hour there and back. Great feeling. During my years outside of education, I felt the loneliest I had ever felt. There was a point where I'd only typically interact with my mum and my weed dealer. On the days I wanted to buy more weed, I would have to wait until after 11 PM, as that was when my dealer got off work from his day job. I would message him and be sat anxiously waiting for him to respond so I could get on my bike and cycle through the night down to his house. It was strange in retrospect. For most of the time I knew him, he was 29 years old, still lived with his mum and had 2 kids with 2 different mothers. We got on, which is strange as he was more than 10 years older than me. I would come into his room and he would be sat on his bed covered in rolling papers, tobacco and weed. He had a lot of stuff, big TV, deluxe editions of Xbox games and a shit ton of weed. When I went to his, I'd typically be there for a couple of hours, sat talking, smoking and just chilling out. Originally I found this to be strange as most of my dealers just exchanged my money for weed, then went on their way. The more frequently I went, the more I realised I had actually gotten to know this guy. I knew his mum, I had met his kids and one of his ex-girlfriends. He would give me weed on tick and trust me to be left in his room on my own around a lot of money and a lot of weed. It felt like I had a friend, but I was conscious of the trope of dealers taking advantage of younger people just to have them sell weed for them. He had asked me if I wanted to do that, but I always refused with not a lot of pushback from him. It felt strange because he wasn't really my friend. I wouldn't hang out with him outside of the context of buying weed from him, but I did usually enjoy my time at his house. At the time, Harry had a girlfriend and wouldn't really talk to me, so I really did feel like he was the only person I had to really hang out and talk with, which is not a good place to be. After I quit smoking, I told him about the anxiety it gave me and how bad it was. He understood, but I never saw him again after that. He messaged me a couple times and we would talk about our lives and general crap, but yeah, whatever friendship I had with him quickly fizzled out as we both continued on with our lives. I sometimes have dreams where I'm trying to contact him to start smoking again. It's very strange. I do still have a part of me that internalized all of the time I spent with him and the connection with him and my addiction. I do miss it sometimes, even though I was lonely and depressed. It was simple, even though weed made my anxiety a lot worse. There's a sick sort of nostalgia about being addicted in the moments where you got to go, just sit and be stoned in your own space. It was the only sense of relief I had at that time. I forgot to mention that both John and Jared both slept with Alex, John actually being in a relationship with her. They were two of my closest friends in high school and both of them knew and saw how much it hurt when we broke up. I am not to say that they can't make their own decisions, but I don't even think you have to subscribe to the bro code to know that's a betrayal of our friendship. I stopped talking to both of them and just tried to move on. I remember hearing a comment that apparently Alex thought it was pathetic for me to even be offended. Clearly any sort of lingering pain from not being together just never existed to her. I was still in the trenches, and she was a tornado just sweeping everyone up, not caring about what pain she caused them. Anyway, I ended up applying for a sound production course as I was making beats on FL Studio as a hobby. I had previously applied for this course, but the lecturer left a bad impression on me and I felt discouraged, so I didn't end up going. I also decided to quit my job, and it felt amazing to quit. I hated working there so much and the people were so soul-sucking. I had saved up enough money to get by for a bit whilst I looked for another job, so I was content for the time being. As 2019 came around, I started hanging around with my cousins Tom and Fraser a lot more. They both played guitar and I saw how good Fraser had gotten. I thought to myself once again, if he can do it, I can too. So I picked up my old guitar and started practicing every day. I had so much time to myself, so I got past the blisters and the initial struggles pretty quickly. I started learning songs I liked and pushed myself to learn tricky riffs. I'd write my own songs and just mess around every day. I managed to play the song Fraser impressed me with within a couple of months into my practice. The song was This Charming Man by the Smiths. They said I was picking it up pretty well, and it made me feel like I had the ability to do what I wanted to do if I set my mind to it. I decided to apply for college again, the same course, and got a job as a delivery driver at Domino's. I managed to balance the course and the job pretty well, and during this time, around September 2019, Harry got into university. I decided to start going to his accommodation to party with him and his flatmates, and I got on with them pretty well. I met a lot of nice people, and it was a big change of pace compared to the past few years. There was this one girl called Karina that I thought seemed interesting. She was very pretty as well, and she was from Finland. I wanted to get to know her. I was developing a bit of a crush on her as I started to visit them every week. The more I got to know her, the more I realized it would never work. She had never been in a relationship and wasn't looking to be in one. Very closed off physically and not very open emotionally. I gave up on this idea, but I still kept visiting because I loved seeing Harry and my new friends. Most times I was there I had to sleep on the floor because there was no spare beds or a couch, etc. I didn't really want to sleep next to Harry either. One night I decided to knock on a girl named Maria's door. I had been getting on really well with her and she was very funny, beautiful and kind. I just didn't really consider what we would be like romantically at the time. But I came in to talk to her and she invited me to sleep in her bed. I wasn't sure if this was a sexual advance, but I decided not to try anything in case it wasn't. I didn't want to ruin anything. I ended up sleeping in her bed every night I was there, and she was very kind to let me do that. One night we were drunk and we were laying facing each other, and something just came over me to kiss her, and I did. She reciprocated and I was happy. The next day it didn't feel weird either. She was very kind and didn't make anything awkward. Things only developed from there. I would go over every week and I would have fun with them all. During Christmas break, Maria went back home to Bulgaria. I went over to Harry's flat to celebrate New Year's with him. We got pretty drunk in his room, then decided to go to the club in town. I continued drinking and was honestly a mess. We both went outside to the smoking area. I saw a girl in a red top standing on her own, so I said to Harry we should go talk to her. I decided to talk to her and I can't even remember what I said, but we ended up dancing and I kissed her a bunch. Then it hit me that I was being a total idiot and left her alone. I can't deny it felt good though. I wanted to feel some sort of affection from someone besides Maria. I hadn't had anything with a girl in a long time. I left the club and realised I thought about Maria and how I'd been spending a lot of time with her and wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew I felt guilty for kissing this girl. I walked all the way back to the flat and called her, told her what happened and she cried, and I cried too, and I felt better. Honestly, I had no reason to feel guilty as we weren't together or committed ourselves to anything, but I did still feel guilty. When she came back, we continued to hang out all the time, and I eventually asked her to be my girlfriend. Things escalated pretty quickly after that as COVID hit. She either had to leave the country or come and stay with me. I was pretty skeptical about this as I value my privacy and she would be in my room 24/7 for the next 3 weeks after that. We weren't sure how long the lockdown would be at that time. Of course it lasted a lot longer than 3 weeks. We got on very well at my home. I had a lot of fun and we spent a lot of time together, smiling and laughing, finding ways to cure the boredom. 2020 was the year that me and Maria laid down the foundation of our relationship. We were together every day whether we liked it or not, and my love grew for her. We would spend hours talking and laughing, going in the hot tub, playing chess, watching movies together. I had finally found someone else that I wanted in my life, and I could actually be around for long periods of time. Things that would be mundane on my own became an adventure, staying up until the morning to go out and get a Tesco meal deal for breakfast, going out for late night drives. I would take her to my favourite spots with the best views in the town. We would smoke cigarettes and just chill. If these were things I was doing alone, it would feel bleak and hopeless. With her it felt like I had someone that lit up the whole void inside him. There was a view I took her to where you could see a radio tower between two trees. The radio tower was covered in red lights. It's obviously just a radio tower, but I remember saying to her, when I stare over there I imagine over there is a life where everything is better, where no one feels any pain. There is just smiles and happiness. The radio tower represented something to me, something beautiful in the distance that seemed so close, but also so far out of reach. The radio tower could be anything that is beautiful in the distance, but that's all I had at the time, and to be fair, it was a pretty radio tower. For a lot of people, 2020 was a painful and stressful year, and rightly so. Lots of changes and lots of isolation. For me, it was a time I look back on with smiles. I got to be with someone I love and spend every moment with them. Even if we weren't doing something together, I could look over at her and be happy I had someone I loved with me. I have to mention someone else here that is very important to me, who I also spent a lot of time with in 2020. My friend Aidan. Aidan is someone I love a lot. He has such a loud personality. He has so much individuality in him. Our sense of humour bounces off each other very well. I have pissed myself laughing over some stupid shit with him so many times. It is something I value a lot. Humour is a connection that really helps me bond with someone, and with him it is always great. He can laugh at himself, but he also has no filter when laughing at someone else. The first time I met him was through a childhood friend. At first I thought he was unbearable, loud and obnoxious. If I never saw him again after that first time meeting him, I would have thought I hadn't missed out on anything, but having to deal with such an annoying cunt. He still is, but now I love him for it. We were never extremely close in high school, but we were friendly. It was only after high school, when we played a lot of PC games together, that we really bonded. I find it really difficult to talk to people I don't know for long periods of time. I feel like I have to be my funniest and most likable self the whole time. But once I have spent time with someone for a bit, I feel more at ease, and if I like them, I feel I can be my natural self, and I enjoy socializing with them a lot more. So as the years went on, we would play a lot of games together, and in lockdown I would spend hours on call with him, speedrunning through Dark Souls 3 and challenging each other to who would complete the game the fastest. We were both getting very good at the game, and we would go back and forth between who won. I loved it. It turned what felt like endless hours of time into something I woke up excited for. Between talking to him and hanging out with Maria, my lockdown experience is something I cherish, So many laughs and late nights spent with people I love. Part of me feels like life is no longer about friends though. Friends as teenagers were everything. You spent nights talking in person or online, endless hours expressing in ways that were so new and fresh as you learned more and more about the world. With no real responsibilities, you could only plan when your next fun adventure would take place, or what game you would spend all night playing. I still have friends from high school, but none of them were the ones I spent the moments mentioned previously with. I have fulfillment in my own life, but I can't help but say I am empty without them. I have never felt connected with others like I have with them. To me now, it feels like they are all dead. I don't know who they are now, but for one reason or another, I distanced myself from all of them after Alex broke up with me. Like I mentioned before, two of them slept with her, and my own concept of friendship just turned into dust. The people I had spent 5 years laughing daily with and growing up around tossed my feelings aside for sex. I honestly couldn't give a single shit if people could say I'm overly self-pitiful or pathetic, blah blah blah. Alex, Sarah, John, Jared, you meant the whole world to me. It seemed like we were all so intertwined, and in the end that's what burnt it all to the ground. Between 2014 to the start of 2016, life gave me a taste of what heaven was like. To have friends and to have love that was special. Now I'm 23 and I am a fucking mess. No amount of therapy or drugs or whatever could change the emptiness I feel inside of my heart. I am feeling particularly shit just now because of the lack of connection I feel with my friends at the moment. My only saving grace is my beautiful Maria. I care about my friends deeply, and I wouldn't be better off without them. But Harry is an absolute dogshit friend at the moment. Basically is burned out. He spends his time putting into effort creating a facade that he is trying to improve his life. He spends 1 week trying to eat healthy, do some physical activity, then returns to being a slob for the next month. And I mean slob. No shower, eating only takeout, doing absolutely nothing but watching TV and wanking. His girlfriend's extremely judgmental mentality is the only thing that seems to whip him into shape, but it's never enough. I honestly feel like we're in this insanely boring transition phase, where we either all find something much better to put our focus on and actually enjoy our lives, or we never move and we're stuck in limbo forever. My feelings now are probably the reason why I fixate so much on the past, because it was so much more exciting. The reason why it was exciting was because of the like-minded people I was friends with. We shared a lot of love for the same artists, the same movies, and the same jokes. We all shared a sense of adventure. Our town was a blank slate to us. Our mental map of this place didn't exist yet. The map was still empty. We blazed what felt like were our own trails, going all over the place, throughout the depths of our shitty hometown, to the woodland outskirts that bordered all the shite within it. My favourite aspect of my hometown is the nature it hosts. It contrasts intensely to the typical rural filth that is the heart of Gloverfield. It holds so much beauty and is the backdrop of all the memories that were made in my teenage years. There was a day during the latter period of COVID lockdown that I decided to walk by myself up to the haunted house. It was intensely foggy and no one was around but me. I put on songs I hadn't listened to in years and meant so much to me because of who I listened to them with. I walked through the fields, just soaking up the intensely nostalgic aura I was submerged in at that moment. It felt otherworldly, like I'd stepped into the back rooms and I was just wandering through a place that existed outside of time. As I approached the haunted house, I stared at it and I was just overwhelmed with saudade at the sight of it. It had been wearing away all these years. Whole parts of the roof had caved in. Places we used to sit together no longer held form. I thought to myself it reflected the state of the relationships I had with my old friends, abandoned and left to rot. Once I was inside, I was greeted with plastic cups we drank dark fruits out of to celebrate Sarah's 15th birthday. They'll probably be there even when we're long gone. I smoked my last cigarette and left the packet next to an engraving on the wall of my name alongside Alex and Sarah's name. The walk home felt symbolic to me, as I knew I wouldn't be going back there physically in a long time. In a way it felt like my final goodbye to that beautiful place. Maybe one day I will visit it again, but that visit can never be recreated, just like the time spent there as a teenager. I've now finished my first year at university. Honestly, it was incredibly bleak. I'm living off campus with Maria and 3 other flatmates, one of them being Harry. I think living off campus has a dramatic effect on how your first year of uni plays out. Rather than drinking and going clubbing with my flatmates, I'm settled down in a relationship with people I met when Harry was in his first year of uni. It was a lot less exciting, but definitely a lot more comfortable. Out of the whole year, there were only 2 people I had genuine conversations with. One I saw as a potential friend, but it went nowhere. It seems a lot harder to make friends as you're older. Everyone already has their friends. For someone to break up into my friend group, they'd have to mesh with my friends as well. And just like everyone else's friends, we're tight-knit and have known each other for years. So to do that with someone else just seems difficult. I assumed everyone in university would be a lot more interesting, a lot more intellectual and engaging in conversation. It turns out it is very similar to high school in my experience, and there are lots of idiots. The thing I hate most about uni is the whole professional facade. Always fake smiles and terrible jokes. Almost every lecturer that gave a little introduction to themselves highlighted the fact that they had hiked up a mountain. It's just not real. No one's life highlight or true personality is climbing up a mountain. I want to see honesty from these people. I know I'm being a bit cynical and unfair. It's not the uni lecturer's job to be my friend. I'm just feeling a bit disappointed in what uni has been like so far. At this point in my life, I honestly don't know how to open up to other people if I don't see something I can latch onto within their mind. A movie we both like, an artist, a game, a sense of humour. I'm working at Domino's again for a summer job, and I don't know how to navigate conversation into anything I can actually talk about, and I struggle to get myself out there, at the risk of feeling misunderstood. I always imagine just stumbling onto someone and everything just falling into place, the small talk being funnier than usual, then a connection through similar interests, that we go on a walk together or just do something that makes us both feel like we've found a friend. This is not to disregard Maria. We love each other and we get on amazingly, but she doesn't like walking or have the sense of adventure or longing for a deep connection with people. It's something I live for. I want someone who just loves walking around and talking, going into the woods to smoke or just driving around. Maria and I used to love going on drives during COVID. We can't do that so easily now that I have to park miles away from the flat, and we're just too skint to actually afford a night out. Hopefully that'll change soon now that I have a job. Something I have a real problem with is sex. I think I have a seriously deep-rooted insecurity about how I look. I long to be desired, but by one person is not enough. It isn't in terms of my want for a relationship. I don't want to be polyamorous or to cheat, etc. But I want to be admired. I want to be lusted over. I have constant fantasies about every woman I meet. I always look at them and instantly think about having sex with them. And it's not even because I want to. When I really start to think about it, I would never have sex with them in the context of who they are in relation to me. My mind just automatically is invaded with intrusive thoughts about having sex with them. It bothers me a lot, and I wish I didn't think like this, and could just interact with people without ever thinking about sex. It happens with other men as well. It just seems to be at the forefront of my mind. If I am present in the moment, I can easily rid myself of the thoughts. I have also managed to learn how to get past them most of the time, but when I drink, I find it difficult not to lust over every woman I look at. It makes me feel like a complete pervert, and I'm ashamed for being this way. It's something I feel I have to lock away, as if other people were to be aware of my constant fantasizing, I would just be perceived as a creep. I also don't feel it is an accurate representation of who I am. I don't see women and men just as sexual fantasies. Sex isn't something I value more than mental connection. I think it isn't even anything to do with the other person. It's just me not being confident in my own self-worth. It's like I have it drilled into me that to be valued I have to be sexually attractive to everyone, and I know that isn't true, or to be honest something I would actually want. Once again, I know this is jumping all over the place, but I treat this like a diary, I guess. I just speak my mind, and if you can follow along or are interested even in the slightest, I'll have something to tell you about my mundane-ass life. During high school, all of the kids from the other primary schools within the catchment area of my town joined to make up the students I would be going through the years of high school with. Most of the people I got close with were from Mary Hall Primary School. I had a friend that went there that lived in the street next to me. We will call him Ian. Ian and I used to hang out with each other quite a bit growing up. We got on quite well, but there was something very off about him and his family, like there was something going on behind the scenes that just felt off. He originally went to the same primary school I went to, but he would always misbehave and do stupid things for attention constantly. After the second year of primary school, he moved to Mary Hall Primary School. He apparently changed up his act when he went there and blamed my primary school for his disruptive behaviour. I always thought that was ridiculous as a kid. It was his own actions that made him get into trouble, and no one else made him act in the ways he did. There were multiple times where he would be seedy and manipulative as a kid. I remember being at his house and him ranking who his closest friends were in front of me. I was a sensitive kid, and hearing him making a point of how his new friends at his new school were above me who had been there since a younger age just hurt my feelings. I went home and was very upset but sat with the emotions. But then the next time I hung out with him, I was bumped up a few rankings. Obviously now, if someone was to act like this, it would mean nothing to me, but at the time I actually felt in relief, hearing that my ranking had been bumped up. In a way, it was like he knew that it meant something to me, and he was toying with me. I'm probably overanalyzing it, but it did leave an impression on me. I skimmed through this looking to see if I had mentioned what I'm about to say, but I don't think I have yet. As a very young child, I went to a daycare where I had my first involuntary sexual encounter. A boy there somehow learned what a blowjob was. He didn't know the connotations or the context of what it actually was. He was told by an older girl that it felt good to put your penis in someone's mouth. So he told me about it, and we both put each other's penises in each other's mouths. It was only when I grew up I began to feel really upset about it, and felt I had no control over something that I had no awareness of. I'm mentioning this because I told Ian about it. He was laughing his ass off, and I instantly regretted it. He knew the other boy that it happened with, and as I was going into high school, I was terrified that he would tell other people about it. We weren't close when going into high school. I felt like we had something against each other, and I had just convinced myself he was going to humiliate me. This never ended up happening, and we ended up becoming friends again. I was closer with him in high school than I ever was as a kid. He was different. He always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, but he wouldn't just act out of attention like he did back in primary school. We spent a lot of time together throughout high school, but things fall apart just like they did with basically everyone I was close with back then. I wrote that down because I actually wanted to talk about someone else, but I met this guy through Ian, and before I even spoke to him, there was an aura around his name. All of the kids from Mary Hall Primary would talk about him, and a lot of them were close with him. He sounded unique and interesting. He ended up going to a Catholic high school whilst we were in first year. It was only during second year of high school that he transitioned over to Gloverfield. We will call him Airy, and the first time I saw him, I noticed how distinct his appearance was. He had long brown hair and beautiful big brown eyes. He was always fiddling with his hands and looking down. His hair usually covered one half of his face, so I was usually looking at one of his eyes whenever I was talking to him. I was originally nervous to speak to him because of the mystique that had been painted over his existence, but I eventually did. We were both in the same digital media class. It was the last class of the day, and I remember he said bye to me. I remember feeling a warmth inside of me when he specifically said bye to me, only after speaking to me a couple of times during our first meeting. As the second year went on, he would start going out to lunch with me and the group I went with. Lunch during high school was great. We would always walk to Mary Hall and get some hot food. The majority of the time I would get a hot dog and an energy drink, and I loved those hot dogs. They bring me a sense of nostalgia, and they are a childhood comfort that I would never turn down when offered. Anyway, me and Airy ended up bonding quite a bit. He was a massive weirdo, always had his unique interests, and was a bit of a shut-in. He never came out with us after school because he was playing this game called Starbound. We would always make fun of the fact that he had over 10,000 hours on that game alone. He also had a really good PC, which is something I dreamed of having back then. I found out he was autistic from one of the guys from Mary Hall. I wouldn't have thought he was, I just thought he was unique. As the years went on, he stopped coming to school. Eventually he dropped out completely. I would message him online a lot and we would have some beautifully deep conversations. He had his own personal ideologies, and the way he would articulate himself was so profound and sensitive. There was a night in 2018 when Harry was on his way up to my house to get weed together. He bumped into Airy and asked him to come with us. Typically, I wouldn't expect him to be up for doing something like that, but he didn't seem to care. And I knew my dealer was a sweet guy, so I didn't think he would be in any danger or anything like that. We sat at my house and joked around. Eventually we got onto the topic of Ian. We spoke about how he had changed and had become a bit of a fuckboy. We wanted to play a stupid prank on him. We decided, just to preface, this is fucking stupid and weird. We decided to print out a picture of a penis with a spider on it and chuck it into his garden. No idea why that is what we decided to do, but we all thought it was ridiculously funny at the time. There was a point where Airy pounced on me like a cat mid-conversation. I think that was the first time I had considered that he'd done that because of his autism, and he didn't consider how socially strange it is for him to do something like that. I didn't mind though. I really cared about him and was very accepting of all his weird shit. We went to the dealers and he tried weed for the first time. He didn't inhale, but I think the hotbox probably got him to feel some sort of buzz. On his way home, he decided to pour some iron brew into a puddle and drink from it, which we all thought was mad, but I wasn't even there to see it since I was in my house grabbing a lighter or something. I never saw him in person after that, but we continued to speak online for years after that. I really loved speaking with him. He was so introverted and socially awkward that he would have no problem ignoring me for days. I eventually got tired of constantly messaging him to no response. It hurt me, and I was upset and felt like he didn't care about me like I did with him. I eventually deleted him on everything and just cut contact. I felt it was easier to accept our friendship was going to die than just constantly feel like it was one-sided. The more life goes on, the more I dislike it. I feel like all dreams of a good future are completely drained from my existence. I still have hope just now, but I feel like it's delusional. Do I want to be wrong? Of course. I want the future to be good. But it seems like I am destined to mediocrity. I constantly try, and I will continue to try. Maybe one day my efforts will get lucky, and I will be rewarded for it. Honestly, I just want money, but I don't want to hate my life in the process of getting it. I just want a balance. I labelled this part stories because I felt these stories didn't fit into any sort of linear narrative, but this whole thing has barely had a linear narrative. But yeah. In 2017, Sarah called me up to see if I wanted to go for a walk and a smoke. At this point, I had a bit of a bitter taste about Sarah, probably because after me and Alex broke up, we began to drift apart. Regardless of the fact I've known her since I was 2 years old, the girls stuck together. I was in what felt like a never-ending process in letting go of the relationship, and I remember I asked Sarah how Alex was doing, and she just screamed at me, "Oh my god, just get over it." It had only been a couple of months after the breakup, and believe me, I was nowhere near the point of getting over it. I felt that was not the response I deserved from the person I had grown up with, spoken to every day for years, and been there through countless hard times. I could tell my pain was a burden, and it didn't even seem like tough love, more like she was painfully aware of how much I was struggling, and to even hear it was too much of a pain to listen to. There was a point after the breakup where my want to have sex caught up with me. I had watched Sarah become pretty promiscuous over the years, and I felt our connection had begun to wither. I had asked her to have sex, and she took it very badly. Told a lot of people about it, and said she saw me differently. That I was an exception to other guys, and that I was her only solid platonic male friend. It's not like I wanted to have a relationship with her, but she did turn me on at the time. I just wanted to have sex, and not think about the consequences of the aftermath. Probably too idealistic of an idea. I felt bad. I wasn't intending on hurting her, but I was just thinking with my dick. I still think her reaction was a bit overboard in terms of telling a bunch of people and shaming me for it. It felt even more hypocritical when we were both at a party in 2018, celebrating New Year's. I was absolutely fucking plastered. I had been on the ground, passed out for 45 minutes, when I eventually got up, kissed a girl, and then fell onto a bed. Sarah was watching us kiss, and said watching us kiss turned her on. We then proceeded to try have sex. I was too drunk so it didn't happen. I couldn't get it up. When I woke up the next day, I felt I had been taken advantage of. Not to say I wouldn't have wanted to sober, but definitely not in the presence of a large gathering of people trying to break into the room. I just felt like there was double standards, but I just left it at that. 2018 was when I dropped out of school, and one day I just decided to cut all contact with her. Her last message to me was to hang out, as she had just happened to be walking past my house. I felt the coincidence for that to be occurring just after a day I bumped into Alex at my weed dealer's house. It just seemed like an attempt to converse about my feelings on seeing Alex for the first time in a while. After that, I received a letter from her, a handwritten one. It was genuine and I know she cared. But just like Alex, she was a tornado. I cared for her too, but she's unaware of how I would just get swept up in her life, her emotions, and her emotional barrages when it suited her to explode at me. Okay, so the story I was originally trying to tell was I decided to go on a walk with her to smoke. I brought my dog with me, and we walked for quite a while, up to the bottom of Folksire Hill. We smoked, sat on a bench, and just chatted for a while. Nothing of note happened, but she did take a Polaroid photo of me walking my dog, which I do really hold dear to me. I really hate photos of myself, but that one is a good one. After we went home, I got a message from her asking if I had noticed she'd lost her 3.5 grams of weight. I honestly hadn't, but I wouldn't put it past her to assume I stole it. I thought to myself, maybe she dropped it at the bench, as I felt that was the only point she could have had something fall out of her pocket. I called up Harry and proposed we walked all the way up to that bench to see if it was there. Harry lived probably over an hour and a half's walk to that bench, but he said he was down. He came up to mine and we headed off on this journey to the bench. It was really dark by the time we walked there. I said before that the bench was at the bottom of Folksire Hill. It is more like a bench on the way to the bottom of Folksire Hill. It was on the outskirts of a place called Cole, which was a nature reserve, which is also the place we would walk through to reach the haunted house. It was pitch black by the time we had traversed through the woods to reach the path that led to the bench. We didn't actually believe the weed would be at the bench. It seemed too good to be true. We arrived there and started looking behind the bench and were gutted to see it wasn't there. We started scanning around with our phone torches and couldn't believe our eyes when we saw the baggie just resting below the bench. We were both ecstatic to see it, laughing our arses off it was actually there. It was a memory we both cherish. I doubt both Harry and I will ever share an experience like that again. My bitter feelings towards Sarah and my addiction to the good old devil's lettuce overrode my moral compass to return what was Sarah's back to her. I justified it to myself somehow, but regardless, Sarah losing that 3.5 grams created a great memory between me and Harry, and she never spoke of it again. I know I wrote that story of two boys finding some weed to the same essence of a Hobbit-esque journey, but that's how it felt in our heads. When I was 12, I was in the last year of primary school. Our year had the opportunity to go to a place called Lyrac. It was basically a summer camp that had a lot of outdoor activity. It was used by all the primary schools in and around Gloverfield as a means to have the kids from all of those different schools to mingle with each other as we transitioned into high school. We would sleep in large dorms with a mixed group of students from each of the schools. We were also placed into groups of around 10 that we would spend the whole week doing activities with. Within the groups we had a bit of an icebreaker session to get to know each other. We all sat in chairs in a circle formation and began to introduce ourselves one by one. I instantly had my eye on this girl with jet black hair. She started talking and turns out she was American. Until this point I had never seen an American in my town, or really anyone else that wasn't raised in my country. My mind was already set on getting to know her. She was called Julie. As the week went on I made attempts to talk to her. As I got to know her and be around her more, I learned she had a very loud personality. I wouldn't say she was arrogant, but she was a bit obnoxious at points, but when we spoke one-on-one, we would laugh and enjoy each other's company. I never made any attempts at flirting or anything like that. She was taller than me at the time, and I didn't really think I could build up enough rapport to get to the point of asking her to be my girlfriend. It's funny noticing how seriously I took it even when I was 12. In hindsight, it's obvious that as a child these relationships aren't going to go anywhere, but they definitely build character and experiences you learn to appreciate. Okay, so I had gotten close enough to Julie to the point of us being able to be Facebook friends. As the weeks went on, we would talk frequently on Facebook and video call each other. I thought she was hilarious, and we had a really good chemistry with each other. She felt different to any of the girls in my primary school, and I really liked her. I eventually asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. I instantly felt overwhelmed with this idea and regretted it. I decided against it, and we both agreed to just stay friends. As time went on and our summer holidays were coming to an end and our transition to high school was about to take place, I had a bunch of insecure thoughts of hanging out with my friends, having Julie come up to me, joining the group and changing the group dynamic. Something about that just didn't sit right with me, and I just decided to cut her off completely. It was a very mean and selfish thing to do, but apparently 12-year-old me was just cutthroat like that. I would see her around school. I started to feel guilt and regret for the decision I'd made. We did genuinely get on, and I did still have feelings for her, so I gave a shot at asking her to forgive me and be friends once again. This friendship escalated back into us dating pretty quickly. I was committed to it this time, but I would quickly learn she wouldn't be. I started hanging out with her in person quite a bit, going to the town village next to my town and just messing around. We had never kissed or anything other than hug each other. I think there was a real connection between us, but we were kind of chalk and cheese. I was very shy, sensitive and thoughtful, whilst she was very loud, obnoxious and reckless. It seemed being involved with her surrounded me with a lot of stupid and dangerous people. For some reason the town psycho had a thing for her, even though he was 16 and she was 12. Turns out morals and the law were no concern to this creature. I encountered him whilst hanging out with her. I don't know why I said encountered, it sounds like he's a fucking Pokemon or something. I was on my bike talking to her in a shallow alleyway when he comes round the corner. I adjust my bike to let him through, and his inbred trauma-induced brain interpreted that... I'm sorry. Okay. He comes round the corner, I adjust my bike to let him through, and his inbred trauma-induced brain interpreted that as me taunting him. He picked up a brick that just happened to be on the ground and went to throw it at me. I could obviously see what he was doing, for as soon as he picked it up, I flew out of there on my bike. I heard the brick land behind me as I took off. I am not sure if I went back, but it made me reluctant to want to go to that part of town ever again. I kept in touch with her after our breakup, and we remained friends. She later informed me she had sex with this psycho. Yes, they were both still the same age as I mentioned earlier. At the time, I wasn't thinking about how morally fucked and disgusting it was, and that she was raped. I just thought it was gross that she had done that. It never really crossed my 12-year-old mind that she was a victim. I would still chase after her, wishing we were together. Oh, how naive I was, and probably still am. This was until I met another girl called Heather. I cannot even be bothered to cover another childhood relationship, but it was another one that ended with me being head over heels and heartbroken. I say that jokingly, because I honestly hadn't experienced real heartbreak until Alex. Every relationship until then could just be written off. They were childhood crushes. What I had with Alex was real, long-term and intimate. As we know, I was not prepared for the consequences of something like that falling apart at a young age. During 2019, I spent a lot of time with my cousin Fraser. This was prompted by the mutual love of playing guitar and similar music taste. Since I had gotten my driver's license, my car and my car insurance, I could go over to his house whenever I wanted. We would play and practice guitar with each other, go on walks and just hang out. He is like a year and a half younger than me, but we got on really well. At the time Harry was dating a girl and he was completely consumed by her. Obviously it is to be expected that within a relationship they will spend a lot of time together, but Jesus. When Harry gets a girlfriend, his whole life orbits her. He will not contact you, he will not get any response sometimes for over a day, and then he will act like he hasn't been gone. Acting like before he had his girlfriend, you weren't hanging out and talking every day. I just spent the last 30 minutes reading old Discord messages between me and Harry, just to see what it was like during that time. Honestly, it made me quite emotional. We were both so tight-knit, we had such nice conversations, and he was a really good friend. I felt like we both had each other's back. It feels like the fact we live together now has stripped us apart of that. We're so physically close, but mentally, our friendship has dwindled. Part of it is probably the fact I stopped smoking weed, but we usually talk for hours if we're on Discord together, playing games. I miss being a teenager. Feels weird saying that. Being 23 just feels stagnant. My future doesn't feel exciting. I feel dull. Okay, sorry, I went off on another big tangent. So, me and Fraser started hanging out a lot more. We started drinking together quite a bit. I would hang out with his friends just to pass the time. We usually had a laugh together. We were both struggling with mental health issues, mainly anxiety. We both had bad drug-induced anxiety attacks, and we bonded with each other over those issues. I would drive out to different towns with him to drink at whatever pubs we wanted to go to. We went out one night, met a racist American, chatted with some millennials, took the piss out of older guys who were also drunk. Just generally were wee fannies. But I was laughing the whole night. Since I drove out there and was absolutely pissed, I was faced with the dilemma of either sleeping in the car until I was sober, or just drive home drunk. Obviously the former is the best choice to make, but I wasn't in the best mind to be making morally sound choices. So we drove home, and I was pretty drunk, but we made it back. After that night, I started thinking driving under the influence wasn't that bad, and I could control it. This isn't going to a place where I crashed my car and killed a small child or anything like that. I just started driving under the influence more often. Luckily I never crashed or had any problems. I did eventually stop, as I knew it was an incredibly selfish and stupid thing to do. But before that, I had a night in Edinburgh going to my older cousin's party. I would go to those parties and just feel like I couldn't connect with anyone. There was no girls I wanted to talk to, or any people I could strike up a real conversation with. So eventually I would just give up hope of having a good night, which would spiral into thinking life would truly never get better. I would begin to sink into a very depressed mood. I decided I would just go and sleep in my car, but of course I eventually got sick of sitting around knowing I wouldn't sleep. So I drove from his flat, decently tipsy, back home, which was around a 40-minute drive. I remember listening to old Skrillex songs like Summit or With You Friends. I felt it took me to a place before all this, where I was safe. I enjoyed Skrillex's music when I was 11 years old. Not to say I hadn't experienced traumatic things by then, but it was simpler. There was multiple points during that drive where I was screaming my soul out. Most of the time I was able to mask my emotions and cope with feeling so terrible in my head, but sometimes it all just came out. I wanted to turn back time and going back to being naive, in love. I just wanted to be happy again. The fact that wasn't possible just tore away at me, and I'd scream my soul out in the car, where no one could hear me. It felt good. I think I might have cried. I managed to get home and just went to bed. I would just laugh it off like nothing happened, since no negative consequences had came of my drunk driving. I eventually stopped it altogether because of one night with Maria. I went to go and buy condoms. I drove to Tesco drunk, and when I got back Maria popped off at me. I began to really consider how terrible it would be if something was to go wrong, and if anyone was to get hurt because of my selfish actions. And I just stopped, and I haven't done it since. At the end of 2019, me, my mum, my cousins, and my auntie, Fraser/Tom's side of the family, decided it would be a brilliant idea to sell our houses and move in together. They sold their house and decided to move into our house until our house sold. Our house never ended up selling and they just stayed at ours instead. At first it was fun. Me and Fraser would go out together constantly, get drunk and just hang out as we'd been doing the rest of that year. As 2020 came around, the honeymoon phase of us living together quickly withered away and the true aspects of our family dynamic began to show. Since we couldn't go out and I was with Maria all the time, me and Fraser stopped hanging out. I stopped drinking as frequently, but his drinking increased rapidly. He would get pissed, and then piss all over the toilet seat, throw food on the house roof, and just stay in the kitchen for hours on end making food. Not to forget he would be up at the crack of dawn with his guitar plugged into his amp, blaring it so loud. It was fucking annoying. I would ask him to turn it down every single time it woke me up, and when we saw him throw food on the roof, I confronted him about it, and he just played it off like it was nothing. Obviously the act of having food on the roof isn't a crime, but it isn't exactly the example of behaviour you'd expect from someone moving into your house, and the fact he was 18 just made it worse. He argued back and tried to stand his ground, which resulted in us not talking for weeks. He did actually take the food down though. Living with Fraser definitely ruined our friendship, but really his mum, my aunt, was the worst part. She was extremely passive and very hard to have any sort of confrontation with when she acted in ways that negatively impacted my mum and I's way of living. I'd put used condoms in the landfill waste bin, assuming that's where it would go, and apparently it's not. After I asked the family group chat one day for the person who left the shite stains in the toilet to clean up, not targeted at anyone personally, she revealed it was her shit stains by rebutting that she shouldn't have to remove my used protection from the bin, which she didn't have to do. She is a self-proclaimed vegetarian who acts like a world peace activist with her vegetarian car stickers, and I offended her by not putting my used condoms in the correct bin. And instead of asking me to move them myself, she moved them. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? The idea of my auntie touching my spunk-filled condoms just really bothered me. Then not mentioning she had done it until I had offended her by asking generally for whoever left skid marks in the bowl to move them. It was just very annoying. Eventually there was a big drama about them moving out. My auntie decided she wanted to move in with her friends slash on and off partner. She spoke with my mum about getting her share of the money that she put into the house. My mum calculated everything and had the house estimated to see if it would have increased in value, then told her how much she would be getting. They agreed, and that seemed to be the end of it, until my mum got an email from her lawyer asking for £60,000 or so, which was a lot more than they agreed on. My mum then asked her to leave, and she decided to strip down naked in front of her, hide in the bed, and refuse to talk to her. Everyone officially left the next day, and I haven't spoken to any of my cousins or aunties since the end of 2020. I was very happy, as it meant no more stupid dramas or unexpected weird behaviours from everyone. And I'm also so glad that my mum isn't an absolute crackpot. I love Maria. She completes me. We are true partners and lovers, truly dedicated to each other. A future with her seems like it is going to be a reality. The only thing that could ever ruin our love seems to be me. Things I was hurt by in the past because of Alex, I ended up doing. Sometimes it was worse. Within our almost 4-year relationship, there are 2 moments I truly regret, and both of those things occurred when I was drunk. The first one was during COVID times, which was very early on in our relationship. I was playing games with my friends and we were all drinking whilst talking over a Discord call. There was a point where I was just completely out of my face. They were talking to me and I wasn't responding. I was vacant. We had music in the call, specifically music from the YouTube channels Galaxy Music and Suicide Sheep. I'm not sure if me or Harry put these songs on, but regardless, I link a lot of the music from those channels to Alex. The song Start Again by Subsound was playing. It brought me back to 2015. I had tears in my eyes and nostalgia in my heart. I assumed the number I had under Alex's name in my phone would have been long disconnected, but for some reason I decided to call it. It went to voicemail, and I felt my intuitions had been confirmed. I texted the number something like, "This number doesn't exist anymore." I had never drunk texted / called her in any of the years post-breakup, so I have no idea why I decided to, even if I thought no one would pick up. I woke up the next day to a call from her number. I was honestly shitting myself in case Maria saw, so I just ended the call and hoped nothing would come of it. I then got text from the number saying, "Who dis? Please tell me, I'm so curious." I ignored them in hopes it would all go away. It turns out Maria saw the whole ordeal when I first texted / called her in the night. She was torn up inside, rightfully so. If that was to happen to me, my heart would sink. Even though I never intended to actually speak with her that night, it was still a very shitty thing to do. It took a while to make this up to Maria, but eventually things felt better. I haven't contacted that number since 2020, and I do not intend to do so ever again. The second event of me being a total piece of shit involved me being extremely drunk once again. We were having a party at our flat with a bunch of people over. I was out my face, decided it was time for me to go to bed, and passed out on me and Maria's bed. I woke up and apparently was on some mission to ruin our relationship. I instantly stated to Maria I wanted a threesome and went to find anyone who wanted to join, without any concern if she even wanted to do that. Maria said if I left the room it was over. I didn't give it a second thought and walked out. I went to our flatmate Karina, who had never had sex before and had never been in a relationship before. Any rational thinking or real understanding for what consequences were had apparently left my mind. I asked her if she wanted to join. She obviously said no. I then said to her that me and Maria weren't going to work out. I was in a complete pursuit of self-destruction, knowing I had ruined our relationship by walking out the door. I tried to kiss her and she rejected me, thankfully. I then sat next to her. She asked me how drunk I was. I said very. I then left the room after talking to her for a while, returned to Maria and fell asleep. The next day, coming to the realization of what I had done, I felt guilt and shame like I had never felt before. I had no one but myself to blame, even though I know if I hadn't been drunk I would never have made those mistakes. I cannot blame it on the alcohol though. I have no idea what I said to Maria, but I was effectively on my hands and knees begging for forgiveness. I wrote a message to Karina, trying to write the sincerest apology I possibly could. I never wanted to be someone that was creepy and hurtful to the ones I love / care about. It was too late for that though. I had to sit and wallow in my emotions I had brought upon myself. Even though things currently are great now with me and Maria, I felt what friendship I had with Karina basically died then and there. I had her forgiveness, but my shame never left me. Anytime I was making jokes or talking with her, there was always a deep-rooted shame reminding myself of my actions. Revisiting these events in my mind, I am reminded I have at times been a terrible person. I know there are worse people out there, but these actions are not those of someone who is loving and caring. They are ones of someone that cared about no one else but themselves. At times, I have thought I shouldn't have gotten together with Maria, as I knew I was hurt. My decision to follow through with our relationship has led me to hurting her on both of these occasions. I don't want to use alcohol as a scapegoat for my behaviour, but I can acknowledge none of these things would have happened if I hadn't been drinking. I do not drink anymore. Ever since that night occurred in late 2021, I haven't been drunk since. I have drank 1 or 2 beers once or twice in the past 2 years, but I do not enjoy it, or enjoy the idea of ever hurting Maria or anyone else like that ever again. I'm not sure if this is an unhealthy way of looking at our relationship, but Maria is my saviour. I have found someone who is willing to fight for our love even when I've been nothing but selfish. I know I will never find another with the heart she is willing to offer me, and I know I will never love like I do with her ever again. Our relationship since that night hasn't been perfect, but it isn't because of me being a prick. More because we have argued over stupid things like cleaning up or stressing over money. Things that typically cause arguments, normal life stresses, rather than my own selfish actions causing pain. I can only thank my drunken self for at least having the soul to draw the line at physically/sexually assaulting anyone. It scares me even thinking about that. I know in my heart I would never do either of those things to anyone, but I never considered myself to be someone to act in either of the ways I've just spoken about. I do not like who I am when I am drunk anymore. I used to be someone filled with love. Now it seems like I turn into someone capable of breaking the trust of my lover and my friends. I can only forgive myself now as I have made actions to prevent acting in those ways ever again. I am not sure how these actions would be perceived by others. Maybe some would be like, it's not that bad, you didn't cheat, you didn't assault them, it could be worse. Most will probably think, why the fuck is Maria still with you? I have wondered that myself many times. Even though it has been years since these events happened, when I think about them I still feel shame. I know at heart I am a good person. It's always easy to take single events and paint someone to be a piece of shit, no questions asked. Everyone does that. But I know who I am today is worthy of love. I will not allow the chance at love to be tainted or to be destroyed by my own actions. I love Maria. No one makes me smile like she does, makes me laugh like she does. I don't want to look into anyone's eyes other than hers and say I love you. What is ironic is that I am the one who is hurt by my lover by being interested in a threesome, which is how I felt with Alex. Years after those events, my love for Maria has grown more and more intense. The bond I have with her is the closest bond I have had with another human, and I want to remain that way. I want her to be my life partner, to be in love forever. I know I need therapy. I want to be truly mentally healthy. Part of me worries it won't help me, and there will be a moment of realization that I'm completely fucked. Or maybe I'm scared of letting go of my pain. I don't know what the answers are, but I know I can only try to be better, one day at a time. I feel at this point I have covered a lot of what I wanted to say. I am starting back up at uni and I'm not really looking forward to it, but you never know. It might be good. I'm finished with my rambling about my previous relationships and complaining about whatever it is I decided to complain about. Something in life I feel seems to be a constant, and is honestly pretty commonly observed by a lot of people, is that it has constant ups, downs, and midpoints. I'm content with whatever I have to deal with. If I lose someone and I feel pain, it's just a response to the happiness they made me feel when I was with them. I do feel there is a balance in life, and I try to maintain it. I don't need to be happy all the time. I don't need to be sad all the time. Once you let go of control, things seem to be easier. Expectations are a lot lower, and your disappointment in people seems to be less frequent, especially for someone like me who is prone to idealism. Not to say I can't influence what happens in my life or take hold of opportunities. I guess I'm saying people will do what they want to do. I have tried to hold on to people, only to be repeatedly reminded that they don't care as much as I do. I do tend to keep my distance from others, but once I trust you, I am vulnerable and will take the risk of hurting because of you. Connection is what I valued most in life. Without it, what is the point? I can laugh with myself, treat my mind like it's my own friend, and of course I know myself best. But there is something special about sharing experiences and thoughts with like-minded people. I feel like since this is the end, I have to say something inspirational or introspective, but I honestly have nothing. I just enjoy sharing things. I find value in writing my experiences and feelings, so whatever this is has served its purpose. I enjoy feeling purpose and want everyone on this earth to share that feeling. Purpose is so important. No one deserves to feel pointless in this life. I tend to be pretty nihilistic, but optimistically. To me that means I can act how I truly want, and not have to worry about my life having some incredibly deep philosophical meaning. Even though I have an innate desire to be admired by others, in the end we're all going to the same place. And I find comfort in knowing that this life doesn't have serious cosmic significance. I get to enjoy this ride on my own terms, and I intend to do so, in comfort and in curiosity.